Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever in the world you are. And thank you very much for joining us tonight. Tonight, we would like to follow up on this issue of what kind of opposition do we have and how are we going to get out of this mess? Because Zimbabwe is in a mess. And tonight, I would like to play a short video on which we can base some of our discussion. And I've got to joining me with the discussion, Benjamin. Welcome to you, Benjamin.
Thank you very much. Good evening to our viewers. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Benjamin. I'll quickly introduce the gentleman in this little clip, a video clip, Brett. He's a Zimbabwean and speaks in Shona, although he's white, as you can see. And he's passionate about Zimbabwe, and that's one of the things I like about him. And I think some of the issues that he's raising here are well worth paying attention to. So let's listen to the short clip. I'm not going to play the whole of it, but just a short clip.
In order to remove a regime, you unfortunately or fortunately need to have a strong opposition. That is the sole reason why most of my videos are criticizing, constructively criticizing, offering ideas, offering support, calling them out to the current opposition that we have. Now, this weekend, Panevan Vargu resigned to CCC, stating that CCC has been infiltrated, CCC has been compromised, CCC has sold out the struggle. Now, I have one problem with that. First and foremost, why do you only resign now when those things that you are resigning for have been happening for 8 years? Ipapo ndo pandoda kunyatsoziva ipapo. Nhasi uri kuti zvainfiltratwa, but zvagara zvakainfiltratwa for 8 years, but nhasi ndo pawamuka nhasi. So that shows us that it takes you 8 years, some cases 10, some of you 23 years in the struggle. 33, sorry. To realize kuti pane vatengesi. That tells me zvinondiratidza kuti you are not capable of making a rational decision. So you're resigning today. The other point that we must emphasize is this project called CCC had no structures. How can a party isina structure get infiltrated when there is only one person who is appointing everyone? Inini, I am in charge of my company. Inini ndinosarudza kuti 5 rand inonodyiwa kupi, mota ichaenda kupi, chanodira fuel rini, chapoinda ani, basa ratinoita toita zvakati. Inini, I am the one who says all of those things. Company ikazobroka, company ikazovhara, ndoti mukoma Felix ndimatadza pana ameno zvamaita ndosaka takonana. Even iwo ndiwe watadza shamwari, company yavhara because of you. Yeah, because of you. Mahobho ari pagedha, hai mhosva yako shamwari, company yavhara. Do you see what is happening here? I am blaming everyone except myself. The president appointed one. For the second time,
We can stop there. My take on this one is this is a valid point that most Zimbabweans should really pay serious attention to. The question of a quality opposition is at the very heart of why Zimbabwe has been stuck with the Zanu PF dictatorship. We all accept Zanu PF is a corrupt, incompetent, and tyrannical regime. And as long as they're in power, they've got carte blanche powers to rig elections, they will stay in power, short of another armed struggle. We can remove Zanu PF from power without an armed struggle if we implement the democratic reform. That is at the heart of it. Since the late 1990s, people of Zimbabwe realized they needed an opposition that will implement the democratic reforms to make sure that we have free, fair, and credible elections. That has been the country's plan B. Why has it failed? 23 years after the formation of MDC and people sacrificing their very lives to elect MDC into power, not even one meaningful reform has been implemented. And that's the reason why Zanu PF is able to continue to blatantly rig the elections. That is the focus that most Zimbabweans have missed. And I'm glad that Brett here has picked that one up. Benjamin, what do you have to say? What can you pick from this video and take home?
I would like to say, I agree with him to say, this is not the first time it's happened. He's saying 8 years, but I can count further back to say, when then CCC, it was called MDC, when it split up, when the Tendai went to one side, the Mtambaras went to the other, right? There was no unity within the opposition then. And I don't know how they came to an agreement and still came back again to form one thing. And now we are seeing this is now, I think, the third time, because there's been so many splinters that are living from within the opposition. Then you do have to ask the question to say, is this the type of opposition that we really need in Zimbabwe? Is this the opposition that we have got that will represent us in the case that Zanu PF is removed? These are some of the fundamental questions that we have to ask ourselves. And we also have to look back in history, because history is a teacher that will teach us the way forward or how to do things better. Otherwise, we will still be making the same mistakes, just the same way we can see in CCC. They're doing exactly the same thing over and over and over again. That is what I think is our biggest problem. Is, yes, we lack a decent opposition, one opposition that we can say they have got their priorities straight, and they're competent enough to know what they are doing. And unfortunately, in this whole circus, CCC and all the other oppositions, I don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm sorry for others that actually think that this is the best foot forward. If this is our best, I dread to think of our worst.
I think the important thing that must be emphasized here is the reality that Zimbabweans have failed to take the opposition to task. what Brett is saying there at the beginning of his clip is that he is criticizing the opposition because without a competent opposition, nothing will change. And unfortunately, I think Zimbabweans, in their mentality, they've assumed this position that the country's political problems are caused by Zanu PF, and therefore then the opposition should be supported wholeheartedly and blindly. And this is at the heart of the problem here. Because if we accept that Zanu PF has failed, then we've got to ask ourselves, how are we going to make sure that Zanu PF is replaced? There is change. We cannot look to Zanu PF to reform itself out of power. We've got to look to the opposition to do that. And then the question is, we realized that in the late 1990s, and we came to the conclusion that we needed to implement democratic changes to remove Zanu PF, to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections specifically. And after 23 years, we have failed to stop Zanu PF rigging the elections. Zanu PF rigged 2023 elections blatantly. That even SADC and the AU could not pretend that the elections were free, fair, and credible. The question then is, why has the opposition failed to implement those reforms? And I think that is the question that Zimbabweans out there have failed to ask themselves. Why has the opposition failed? Accepting that is absolutely important for you to go forward. Because burying your head in the sand and pretending that, no, the problem is not with the opposition, his problem is with Zanu PF. We already know Zanu PF is a problem. We already know Zanu PF rigs elections. The question is, how are we going to stop them? And if the opposition have failed to stop them in 23 years, including 5 in the GNU, surely we should accept that the opposition has failed. I think, I don't know, Benjamin, I honestly think without accepting that, we will always be going round and round in circles here.
Yes, I agree with you. Our biggest problem as Zimbabweans is that we have turned ourselves into, a wildebeest head, where whoever is leading, we just go. If the leader goes off a cliff, the whole head is going to go off a cliff, and we are not questioning. Yes, we people ask, why don't you talk about the bad that Zanu is doing? We cannot talk about Zanu because we already know their position, that they've totally failed, and they themselves have a seared conscience. Their heart is already made out of stone, and they've decided to take that path no matter what. But here is somebody that is coming to promise people that are desperate, that are praying. I could actually saying that Triple C is preying on people's emotions because people are desperate. People now perceive them as if they are the only hope that can get us out of this mess. Yet this is not the case. We need to ask them. Your name from the very beginning was MDC, Movement for Democratic Change. What change have you brought about to show that this is what your organization stands for? And unfortunately, like you said, it's just blind loyalty. Chamisa and his faithful few, they do no wrong, and this is what it has come to. And just to think about what the future holds going forward, if we continue with such a mentality, I don't see any change coming anytime soon. It will be just Zanu until the great grandchildren do the same thing, just like what their grandfathers did. We have to try and stop and question, you know, the opposition leaders, to say you have been taking us around and around in circles, changing names. The only change that you have brought about is the change of names. You know, it doesn't make any sense. All that they, whatever strategies they have in place, for me, I don't think those are strategies. I think it's just foolishness. I think they need you. You are right there. They need to be asked and, you know, taken to task. What are you doing? Why are you promising all these things and yet you've delivered none?
Yep. I think it is important here that I think Zimbabweans are beginning to ask the questions, those pertinent questions, and one can only hope that this will carry on. At the end of Brett's video, he actually says that the opposition, given their history, they failed to implement any meaningful reforms, any meaningful changes, and his conclusion is that the opposition is Zanu PF B Team. I have to agree with him. People have got to accept that the opposition had the opportunity to implement the reforms, but they did not. The opposition have been participating in these flawed elections, knowing fully well the process is flawed, only to give Zanu PF legitimacy. And they get a few gravitrine seats. That is exactly what you'd expect an opposition that is a Zanu PF B Team in all but name will do. And we can bury our heads in the sand and pretend that the opposition will deliver change. The truth of the matter is the opposition, particularly this opposition as it's presently constituted, with people who have already proven beyond all reasonable doubt that they are corrupt and incompetent, particularly during the GNU by failing to implement even one meaningful reform. I think Zimbabweans have got only themselves to blame if they're going to bury their heads in the sand and expect there will be any meaningful change from an opposition that is a Zanu PF B Team in all but name.
You know, he was also, if I may draw back, he was also talking about Chamisa being in charge and saying that, you know, for example, he is the boss at his workplace, and, you know, he can, if the company goes down, you can't go and ask the security guard to say, you know, you let the company go down, or push the blame to somebody else. The reason why I'm stating this is, let's look, for example, Chamisa before the 2023 elections. What he was going, you know, telling each and every one of us, and what he was promising. First of all, he said he had strategies, and one of his strategies was mass registration. Let us register in numbers. We know how that turned out. That never worked. He says he's closed all the rigging loopholes, and Zanu PF managed to win quite convincingly, you know. And here he is now, and then he was also not now. He was also claiming that his strategy of ambiguity is the best way forward. And then how did all these things happen on his watch? So this is some of the questions that we need to ask him, and he has to provide answers. We shouldn't be looking forward to the formation of a new party without any answers and just keep going as if it's just any other day. It's business as usual. That's not right. I personally believe that is somebody that needs to be asked to say, you promised all these things, and from all those things that he promised, not even one has been fulfilled. If we cannot ask him now when he has less power, or bring him to account now when he has less power, how do you expect to ask him these questions when he's got all that power bestowed on him? This is where the problem is. And this is how this problem, why Zimbabwe is in a mess, started. We just came, we put in Mugabe, no background check, no questions. As long as we are getting what we want at that moment, it's a go for it. This is our problem as Zimbabweans. We do not stop to question and to look at the facts that are on the ground and to see the characteristics of the individual that we want to put on a very, very important position. I think this is where we lack as Zimbabweans. We sell ourselves short by not doing the fundamentals right. This is why we find there's no democratic reform that has been implemented, because we are taking shortcuts, coming up with funny strategies, and trying to, it doesn't work. Doing the right thing always counts, always. That's what I think.
Well, I'll just quickly reiterate the point there that you made, that if we cannot control Chamisa now, how are we going to control him once he gets into power? The truth of the matter is, with the present setup, Chamisa had the opportunity to implement, or MDC had the opportunity to implement the democratic reforms which would have stopped Zanu PF breaking the elections during the GNU. They had the trump cards. If they failed to implement even one reform when they had all that power, that opportunity, when they had all the trump cards, it is naive to think that they will now do it when they are, Zanu PF is in control. And after these recent by-elections, Zanu PF's got 2/3 majority. And at the rate at which we are going, I think the next lot of by-elections could see Zanu PF getting a super majority. To expect that somehow the opposition will manage to force Zanu PF to implement meaningful democratic reforms so that the 2028 elections are free, fair, and credible, and Chamisa gets into power is naive, to say the very least. So I would like to end my discussion tonight by reiterating what Brett was trying to say there at the very beginning of that clip. That Zimbabwe, if we are serious about having democratic change in Zimbabwe, we need a competent opposition. An opposition that has failed to implement even one token reform in 23 years, 5 of which in the GNU. An opposition that has been participating in flawed elections to give Zanu PF legitimacy is not the strong opposition the country needs. We can pretend that it is what we want, but the reality will come back and bite us. there will be no meaningful change. And at the present moment, with the present infighting in Triple C, I think it'll take a brave individual to say that they expect to see any meaningful change between now and 2028. And if we have got our trust in Triple C, and no doubt they will participate, whichever version of Triple C comes out, participate, claiming that they will win this time, that we are going to win, and we are going to win big, and participate without any reforms. Zanu PF will rig, and then Zanu PF has got legitimacy, and it's business as usual. That is the most important message I would like to leave with the listeners tonight. Benji, if you would like to give your closing remarks.
So I personally believe that us Zimbabweans are the ones that have the key to our happiness, to our own good living. If only we can do the right things, ask the right questions, follow procedures that need to be followed, not to come up with shortcuts, and to think for ourselves. And to think for ourselves, it should be right at the very beginning. Because only then, if we open our eyes, if we use our heads to think for ourselves, this is when we realize that all along we're just being, sold short. Because I personally do not see, I think we are worse off than what we were without all this Triple C and MDC fiasco. Today infighting, tomorrow they'll be back again as a coalition or an army of some sort, telling you that we are stronger than ever. And time is moving. Zanu PF is not going to stop looting because you guys are forming another party. No. It's business as usual. By the time we realize and start thinking for ourselves, we will be poorer than what we are now, and nothing left for our children. So this is the time now where we need to put our heads together to think and see things as they are. Nobody hates Chamisa, no. It is what he promises and what he stands for that people are against, and what people should, open their eyes and see for themselves, that they are just being promised absolutely hot air, sold short at the end of the day. And thanks to people like Brett that are coming up and sharing the initiative to try and teach everyone. You may not agree with it, but this is exactly what is happening, and this has been happening for a very, very long time. That's what I got to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Benjamin. And with those closing remarks, I would like to say good night to everybody, and thank you very much for listening. Tomorrow we will be discussing a panel discussion that was chaired by Professor Ibo Mandaza, discussing on these very issues of the way forward. And he had a number of panelists there. They raised a number of interesting issues. And what I would like to do is to take extracts from those, from that video, and discuss them, expand them, and comment on them, in the hope that it will help enlighten more people and further the debate. But with that, we'll leave that one for tomorrow. With that one, thank you very much again, Benjamin, and good night to everybody.
Thank you for having me, and good night to everyone else.